general public by doing these events. So every year, during the New York Auto Show, which is going on right now at Javits Center, I try to have an event like this where I have an automotive sponsor. This year it's Kia. You'll notice that the 2016 Kia Sedona is parked right out front. And so I allow folks like you to check out the car in a non-pressurized environment. Like no one's going to try to sell you the car. It's not like a dealership experience. It's a little more laid back. You've got some drinks, you have some fun, got some music. But that's my typical car experience, and I'm trying to expand that experience and give it to folks like you. So that's the genesis of the SimplyRides.com New York Auto Show Mixer. So this year I'm doing something really special. I'm working on a project called Brown Boy Bad with Thomas Reed. First, to my right here. Give it up for Thomas Reed. It happened kind of spontaneously, and I won't say too much about it because I want the work to speak for itself. But after we play this first episode and a matching podcast, we're going to talk a little bit about what happened, how it came to be, and open it up for some Q&A before we get back to the bar and do some giveaways and have some fun. All right, so I think if we're ready, we're going to play the episode. All right.
You know, I never really gave hoodies a whole lot of thought until all of the things that were happening with black men in our country and the police officers. My personal feeling about hoodies is actually quite comfortable. I really wonder if people can see me or what they, may think of me if I'm trying to hide as opposed to trying to keep warm. I very rarely get the piece where people are maybe afraid or intimidated by me because of my size. There are times when my size, whether white or black, can tend to make some people think that I'm more capable of physically handling myself if there were to be some sort of altercation when I'm anything but a fighter. My response to what's been going on with black men being shot or killed by police officers or white officers that may be in positions of authority in the case of Trayvon Martin, not necessarily an officer, period. One, me being a black man is frightening. Me being a black male and having a son really causes a little fear that any black male could be probable that they could have that same kind of confrontation with a person of authority. It makes me really concerned about how me, black men, position ourselves and what people think of us because of maybe just some other images in the media. Not necessarily who we actually are, but what they think we may be. My son had a substitute teacher a couple of days ago. He and I were talking about the image that we present of ourselves. And he was telling me how his substitute teacher was pretty hard on him throughout the day, making him not talk, making him sit down, and he kept saying that even the moments that she was telling him not to talk, it was when he was answering questions for the class, or when he had gotten up to maybe go sharpen a pencil, that she was really hard on him, as he thought unnecessarily. Said by the end of the day, the teacher said to him, "Hey, you're nothing like what I thought you were." He said to me that he didn't understand what that meant until he and I were having a conversation about what we present of ourselves to others and how we dress makes an unknown statement to others because of what has been presented to them and maybe the images in the media or what they've just come to understand of race period. As a father, I felt bad for two reasons. One, because it was so unnecessary, period. He was certainly being judged by how he looked as opposed to what his abilities are. That was one. Two, as a father, I personally felt bad because I'm the one who let him go out of the house like that. So it made me really concerned about what conversations I am not having with my children that I need to constantly make sure that I am having. There's plenty of good that has come out of the loss of the lives of these black men in the last couple of years. Trayvon Martin, Eric Gardner, Michael Brown. One of those good things is that it's really started this conversation again for all of us. Something that we're able to pass down to our children again. Just making sure that they're more aware of the statement that they're making solely by the attire that they choose in the mornings.
You know how the brother have a little swag at the end, right? Have a little swag. So let me explain how this project came to be. I said before, I am an automotive journalist, and I had just finished doing a series of interviews. These are what I call test drive interviews. They're interviews that take place inside the car during the test drive, right? So I just finished doing a series of test drive interviews with these successful black women about their careers. And it was all about their careers in the cars with the backdrop. And I just finished that when the Eric Garner verdict came down and the Mike Brown verdict came down. And I was feeling, like a lot of people, like I needed to do something more than just post a photo with the hashtag Black Lives Matter. That I needed to contribute actively to the conversation. Now I was trying to figure out how I could do that being an automotive journalist, like how I could wrap the two together. So I decided to do a series of interviews. My first decision was, let's do a series of interviews with successful black men. Just that. Let's just show some successful black men out there in these beautiful cars. Right? And my second decision was, well, let me put them in hoodies and have this kind of visual juxtaposition between what the general public might expect from this person who's wearing a hoodie versus who they actually are. And ironically, the man in this video didn't even own a hoodie. We had to buy that hoodie right before the shoot. He's like, a hoodie? You know, I had to talk him into it, but I explained what the project was, you know. And he doesn't even have one, you know, in his wardrobe. And anyway, we started shooting just the stills of him with the Kia Sedona. And 5 minutes into shooting the stills, we got accosted by these white hillbillies with guns who were challenging us about where we were, even though we were in a vacant lot. This was in Nashville, Tennessee. And so we got tense, or for better words, keep it like that. It got tense, right? And after they left, we couldn't really talk about the car. Like we tried to. I tried to do what I typically do, you know, tell me a little bit about the car, how it makes you feel, but we couldn't do that. And so it changed from being a subtext of racism to being the forefront. That's all we could talk about. When I finally asked him to tell me about what just happened, that's when the floodgates opened. He started talking about what just happened, I kind of got into it, and then what you saw on the screen there was kind of the result. Like we really got into a conversation about race, race-based assumption, appearance-based assumption, and that story about his son was really interesting because that story didn't come up until he started talking to his son about not wearing hoodies. And when he started talking to his son about not wearing hoodies, that's when his son said, oh, now it makes sense. He explained that whole experience with the substitute teacher. But he, my friend, might have never gotten that story from his son if they hadn't had that conversation, right? So I think that's really interesting. You know, these conversations that black men are having with their children right now because of what's happening out there in the world. All right, so that's enough for right now. And I'm going to turn it over to Thomas Reed, who's going to talk about the kind of companion piece to Brown Boy Bad. So give it up again for Thomas Reed.
All right. So the companion piece, I'll get to the name at the end, but Sekou was telling me about Brown Boy Bad and about the video. And I myself, I work with audio, so I'm always like, yo, why don't you do something with audio? Let's do something with audio, right? And while we were talking about this particular video, the experience that he was just kind of telling you about, the idea that I proposed to him was, well, what about an audio podcast that goes behind this or before these types of experiences? Meaning, as black men, as black people, we can probably point out one of our first experiences with racism. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. So since we were focusing on black men, I said, well, why don't we do that? Why don't we make an audio companion podcast where we just, these same folks that you're interviewing, we ask them about their first racial experience. And that became known as Before Brown Boy Bad, because these were, we as black men are treated one way before we hit an age, a certain age in life, and we start to be treated a different way. And then when we have those racial experiences. So this is Before Brown Boy Bad, the podcast, and this is just a teaser, just to try to get you to go and check out the film.
I'm from a little small town, North Carolina. There is a community in North Carolina that is called Faith. Faith is treated like another little city, but it has no government, it has no mayor, it's really just a community. There was a sign in Faith that said, upon entering this community, nigga, if you've been here long enough to read this sign, you've been here too long, too long. Today, as I recall, it was a weekday, nearing summer, school's almost out, pretty day, sunny, not too warm, not too cold, just a perfect play day for kids. It was a friend of mine, really good friend. He and I spent a lot of time playing together. Coincidentally, white kid. At the time we were in elementary school, I'm going to say 3rd, 4th grade, something like that. All the times that he and I had these play dates back in those days, our fathers were never around. It was always exchanged with the moms. So I never met his dad. He'd never met mine. But this particular day, the father came home as my mom was dropping me off. That day we played like any other time. The dad was pretty dismissive of me being there, and we just hung out. It was on the next play date that my father came, and they were preparing like we were almost going to church as opposed to a play date. Everybody was, getting dressed. I remember having to put a suit on. It was the middle of the day. We all went over there together, me, my mom, and dad. His parents welcomed us in the house, and we all kind of post up on an island in the kitchen. He was in the kitchen also, my friend, and his parents. And the father began to explain to us that this would be our last time being able to spend time together as friends. My friend and I, we were both pretty distraught. I remember looking at him, and he seemed to have two emotions going on. One, he looked confused. Two, he also looked hurt that we weren't going to be able to play any longer. I was just hurt that we weren't going to be able to play any longer. I wouldn't learn until, years later what that moment clearly meant.
So that's the trailer for the podcast. That's a cliffhanger, right? Cliffhanger, right? That's a spark to mention. Spark to mention. Want to say some more about that?
Just check out the podcast when it comes out. You want to download. The thing is that it is a really interesting twist. You might think you know what it is, but there's a very interesting twist about that story. But download it.
So that said, I just want to say a little bit about what this project is and where it's going, and then we're going to have someone come up here to ask us a couple questions and allow you to ask us some questions too before we get back to the party. But so this project, Brown Boy Bad and Before Brown Boy Bad, is kind of taking on a life of its own. So it first started as this serendipitous web series, and now we've got this twin podcast, and also we've got bracelets. This is the Brown Boy Bad bracelet. It's onyx and orange jade. And we've started selling these to raise money to film the next episodes, because Kia has been generous about providing the cars, but it's very political, right? So it's hard to get behind financially because of the subject matter. And it was a pretty funny conversation that I had with Kia, because meanwhile I'm just supposed to be test driving the car, right? Doing what I typically do, like the steering is nice, the tires are dope. But I come back with Brown Boy Bad, I'm like, listen, so what happened was there were these hillbillies, but I appreciate them, standing behind me and allowing me to use the cars. and being kind of committed to the project in that sense. But we are trying to raise money to do some more episodes, so that's why we're doing donations here. And we're trying to build this out. The one really big announcement, Ebony has just picked this up. This episode, yeah, right? Make some noise for Ebony. So this episode you just saw, you guys were the first people to see it. It's going to air on Ebony's website, I think maybe next week. And then we're going to get the podcast out too. There is a whole podcast associated with this same, if you didn't realize, that's the same person, same person's voice. And there's going to be 2 episodes, 2 visual episodes with him and 2 podcast episodes with him before we start doing some more interviews. So that's the basics. And I'm going to have Brittany come up here and ask us some questions because she's familiar with both sides of this project, and then we want to open it up to questions if you guys have anything you want to ask us about. So please give it up for Brittany Walker of GypsyJohns.com.
No pressure. Good evening, everybody. Yes. Oh, I'm Brittany Monique Walker of GypsyJohns.com, and I'm here to answer questions or ask questions. That's it. All right. So first of all, Sekou, tell us about your first experience with GypsyJohns.
So I feel like this is one of those, before I answer that, this is one of those questions that one of those conversations we don't really have. Like we all have these experiences, but we don't really talk about them with our boys like that, right? So my first experience was, when I was a kid, my parents put me in a ballet. And I was nice. My ballet was nice. Don't laugh. My ballet was hot. You say it. And I auditioned for the Nutcracker. And I rocked it. I did. You know, I felt good about my audition. I was looking at the other kids there, and I felt good about it. And I didn't get a call back. Not even for, like, you know, the bush standing in the corner. This nothing. Like, this was 3rd grade. So anyway, I didn't think that much about it. But then my parents took me to see the Nutcracker, the actual production that I had auditioned for, and there wasn't a black face on the stage. And that's when I asked my parents about it, and I realized that it had to do with what I looked like instead of what my skill set was. And so that was the first conversation I had with my parents about race. You know, the first of many. That was mine. You want to tell me yours, Tommy?
So mine was in 1st grade. Yeah, 6 years old. I went to a Catholic school in the Bronx. It was in a very white neighborhood, all white neighborhood. And the first, it was probably, I don't know if it was the first week, but it was my first year there, but that school started at kindergarten. So a lot of kids already knew each other. And I was the only black child in this class. And a 2nd grader, during one recess, I don't know what happened, but he was like the bully, 2nd grade of the school. And he called me a nigger. And that was my first time hearing it, but something triggered in me because I immediately knew, I don't think you're supposed to call me that. So his face met my Scooby-Doo lunchbox. That's actually what happened. And that was my story. That's my first time.
All right. I'm with the force right away. So Black Lives Matter movement, you know, it's been intense, and a lot of people have been trying to figure out ways to be a part of it and to make a difference. What is your opinion right now about how things are going as far as making a difference when it comes to racism? I mean, we've got Starbucks talking about start conversations with strangers. I don't know how you feel about that, but, you know, personally, I don't know if that's okay. You know, I don't want to talk about racism with a stranger all the time. You know, people doing marches, and, you know, there's this thing called hashtag activism. So, you know, what is your opinion? We'll start with Tommy.
So, you want to go first?
So I want to pick up on that hashtag activism thing. Like, you probably haven't heard the expression before, but you get it immediately, right? It's just posting stuff with a hashtag, and that is your activism. And that's what I was trying to get away from, because that's what I was doing. I was doing a whole lot of Black Lives Matter posts, and for a while I shut down my Instagram with just Black Lives Matter. I felt like nothing else was as important as those Black Lives Matter posts right then, right? But then I felt like, well, what else can I do though? Like, how can I really affect the conversation And that was the genesis for, well, the kernel that became Brown Boy Bad. Back to you, Tony.
Well, I actually do think that conversations matter. I think conversations that we have with our children, I myself do not have sons, I have daughters, and we talk about race, we talk about all sorts of things, because the only way for kids to get an understanding is for us to give it to them, because it's not something that they're going to get outside, or they'll get the wrong understanding outside. But as far as adults are concerned, yeah, I don't know if Starbucks, I guess they mean well, or is it just a marketing trick? Possibly. But the sentiment behind it, I think, is right, that we do need to talk, because when I say we, I don't necessarily mean we as who's probably in here, I'm assuming who's probably in here, but I think the conversation can't just be within our community. And I think the other communities need to have that conversations amongst themselves, and as well as not shying away from the issues and kind of changing the subject when these types of things happen. So, meeting Carol Gardner, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, well, so speaking of other communities, specifically the white community, they are privileged. You know, I think many of us can agree with that, and so they're able to avoid these kinds of conversations. So how do we hold them accountable to, you know, being aware and trying to come out of their comfort zone and be conscious of their own racism and institutional racism and things that they are benefiting from when it comes to, you know, the enslavement history and our racial history in this country?
Yeah, that's tough. It's a long answer, right? But I got a short story that I think puts a pin on it. There's a friend of mine is teaching at a college where he was the only black teacher of 300 teachers, right? And he would spend most of his day in his office to avoid any unnecessary drama. But one day he was at the water cooler, and this guy rolls up on him and goes flat off about Al Sharpton. A long tirade about Al Sharpton, right, goes flat off. And the guy waits until he's finished and says, "Who's Al Sharpton?" And I think that kind of creative dissonance is important, right? Because the white man didn't know how to respond to that then, right? He had to think about what he just done. He just assumed that this black person was familiar with Al Sharpton and had an opinion about it. And so he shook him up a little bit. He said that for the rest of his time there, he interacted with that same guy, but they never talked about those kinds of race politics again. And I think it's important that we try to respond to those types of situations in a way that shifts the conversation a little bit. It makes them think about what they've just done. Because if you just go flat off, sometimes you just play into the stereotypes that they already have in their head anyway, and then it makes no real difference down the line. So I'm a big advocate of creative dissonance or, Jedi mind tricks.
Yeah. Wow. So I say wow because I don't think I'm one of those hotheads necessarily. Because I remember when that means they know me, right? Yeah. I'm really not. That was in first grade. I've grown since then. But remember when it was the whole Crown Heights incident, back in the 90s, early 90s. And I remember that being a real hot topic on the job. And I remember getting into a conversation with some white people. And I felt, I remember feeling that in the pit of my stomach, like I wanted to escape the conversation. But at the same time, I felt I should give my opinion, not just let them have their opinion, or at least have, consider something else. So I took that approach. And I did feel myself getting heated. I did. And it was, again, I wasn't as mature as I am now. But, so I do think there is something to be said about if you have the opportunity to have that conversation. There's a saying, like when you have an opportunity to have that microphone, you take that microphone so somebody can hear what you have to say. And I kind of feel that way when I'm approached. So it's just about being able to express yourself with dignity and get your point across without hitting the person in the head with your stupid lunch.
One more funny story. Is Max in here? Yeah, there he is. So my lawyer, Max, he's a funny guy. We're at like H&M or something shopping, and I'm buying some gloves. So we're in line to buy gloves, right? But Max's lawyer, he was looking at the suits. But now we're in line to buy gloves. Just want to make sure everyone's clear. We're buying something, right? And this woman who has been working the suit section comes over. She passes by 2 or 3 times, and she walks up to us and says, "Did you put that suit back?" Wow. Right now, I got heated immediately, right? Hot, red face, everything. Had my mouth open. Max says, "No, I'm wearing that suit underneath this one." Everyone in line fell out. All the checkout counter folks fell out. She turned beet red, walked away, and I bet she never did that to anyone else again. So you got to shake people up. That's all. Thanks, man.
Okay, so I want to switch gears a little bit. With Black Lives Matter, again, people have also been responding in a different way, saying that, well, why don't we teach that to our own community? And, where there is difference, between what we're trying to talk about, what we're trying to portray, and then there's an actual issue, within our community, we have to find value within ourselves. And so I'm bringing this up because I spoke to a NYPD officer who is a black man and who grew up in the hood, and he has a very interesting opinion about, this kind of movement. And he says that it's important for us to change our minds about ourselves and the way we treat our communities. And he was explaining that, a lot of the police calls, they're coming to black communities and they see the differences between our communities and other ethnic groups. And where our communities, sometimes we've got we've got trash on the streets and people are, there's a lack of respect in our communities. And, there's different opinions about that. But when it comes to Black Lives Matter, how do we impact our own communities and change the way we perceive one another? We still have to work on our love and our commitment to one another and our, our congruency as a community. What is your thought about that?
Well, my thought about that is that I do agree to a certain extent. I agree that we do need to check ourselves. What I have a problem with is the way, to me, I often consider that the okie doke. When the conversation is about something like, the okie doke is to say, well, what about you? What are you doing? And I would just say, well, yeah, absolutely. We do things to be pointed at that says that, okay, we are working on it. But let's not move away from the real conversation. The conversation is, y'all murdering black boys. And so I don't appreciate the open.
Yeah, I co-sign. That conversation is used as an excuse for the other, right? Like, the conversation about what black folks are doing to each other is the excuse to get you to stop talking about what white folks are doing, and institutional racism and all the really bigger issues. And I feel like when race comes up for the average white person, there's an automatic wall, right? Like, that's the end of the conversation. Like, when it comes to, they start using terms like post-racial and using phrases like, I never had no slaves. Like, all those things just stop the conversation. And for me, what I'm trying to do is not in the conversation. I'm trying to approach it in such a way that we can get past just those opening sentences. So, like with Brown Boy Bad, I'm talking about race-based assumptions. So the racism is in there, but it's not quite as in your face. Like, but that's what happens when you see a black man standing in front of a hotel and you see he's the valet and not the president of the United States. Those types of things. So anyway, I agree with Tommy. I feel like sometimes one conversation is used to excuse the other, and I don't think that's right.
Thank you, gentlemen. All right, does anybody have any questions out there about the project, about want to go up out the mouth about some white people? I don't know, whatever. Yes, ma'am.
Do we have and how that conversation plays into Brown Boy Bag.
Yeah, so so Stacey's referring to this article where Pharrell was talking about the new black, right? And I think there was a response piece that encapsulated my feelings. That, you know, when you're rich and famous enough, you get inoculized to a lot of the things that you may have had to deal with before. Right? I mean, not always. Chris Rock is right now doing a series of selfies about being pulled over by police officers, right? But for the most part, when people know who you are, you're inoculized. You don't get the same treatment. And so I think that he's speaking from that experience, and he's forgotten the real deal for the rest of us. You want to say anything? I'm just asking. Any other comments, questions, criticisms? Before?
Can you comment on the, since we're talking about current events, can you comment on the Raven Simone, I am not African American, I'm American thing? I'm foreign, so I'm not African American, but I'm black, right? So I guess I never understood what was the, I guess, I don't know how to put it, but why don't people like being called African American?
You want to ask somebody that?
Yeah.
Ask Raven. I don't know if this is a problem.
I need the mic. We can hear each other.
I think it's a great question, but I just want to say that this country is a very unique country, and that's not phrase. It's just to say that there's a social construct here. And race in itself is a social construct, but you realize when you travel to other countries, they're not doing anything that America does. And in America, as much as no one admits it, it's a two-pronged institutional country that's run like a business. That's the best way to describe it. It's not like Great Britain, it's not like France. They think of things in terms of black and white. Their version of black is white American and is not European. Their version of black is not simply black, but is African American. And we're really people who are the original people. And they know that. They would probably prefer to call us colored or Negro. But I don't think what she did, I think it was more out of I thought it was done more out of ignorance. Just the same way someone says they're black or they're American, but they don't have anything else. On some levels, it's also ignorance. So it's a matter of how well you understand this country. And some people here who are not foreign don't understand this country. Is that answer your question?
No. Somewhat.
Yeah, because I think she said it out of ignorance. So and she's not stupid, but I think sometimes people don't really know better. And I think that, you know, when you say things out of ignorance, we shouldn't attack the person saying it. You know, it's more about, you know, maybe waiting until someone receives the education about it. It's like calling yourself black. You probably shouldn't even call yourself black. We're calling ourselves that because it's a disposition, and we accept the disposition. Most of us do. Some of us don't even do that. The name is that you're the original people of the earth, the first people who were here in the world, not this country. You're not a minority. We're not people of color. We're none of that.
Okay.
You understand? So
She just got way deep on you. So.
So to keep it real simple and break the tension in the room over race, I just need to know, when can I get set up for a test drive?
Appreciate that. I appreciate that. So on that note, the 2016 Kia Sedona is parked out front. I know it's raining, but we do have the keys if you want to check it out. It is one of the baddest minivans you will ever see in your life. Trust me, I'm not a minivan dude, but I'm telling you, it's a bad car. It's a bad car. So just a couple wrap-up things. I want to explain the title. Brown Boy Bad with the question mark in parentheses. I'm trying with this project to change kind of that gut reaction to black men. I feel like it's not the words per se, it's a feeling. Like sometimes when the general public runs into a black male, when they clutch their purse, let's say. I feel like that feeling is brown boy bad. I'm trying to add the question mark. By showing these black men who are intelligent, articulate, accomplished in hoodies, and then showing their accomplishments at the end of the episode, I'm trying to introduce the idea that, you know, maybe they should think twice about who these people could be. And I think Sonia wants to say a couple rapid things too.
So I mentioned before about when you have the microphone, you should take that opportunity to say something. So I do want to take one opportunity because we talk about these experiences as black men, and I just want to share a little story, not really a story, but like all of us, we have those situations when you're walking down the street, somebody clutches their purse. And one of the things that I find very interesting, whether you know or not, I am blind. I lost my sight 11 years ago. And one of the biggest differences that I found, when we talk about perception and misperception, is how when I lost my sight, you know, people weren't scared of me anymore. In fact, everybody want to help me, think I need help. And so when we're thinking about perceptions, we think about blackness, we think about that, don't forget that there are other things, quote unquote, you know, categorizations. So people with disabilities. So if you ever get a chance, I'm just going to plug my little Read My Mind radio. What we're doing, we're a part of another organization, and we are raising awareness about this exact thing. And so what we're trying to do is to bring out stories about people who have vision loss, that could be totally blind or low vision, just to talk about some of the misperceptions that people have about that, because I think it kind of fits in with this. If you're into changing the perception of black people, then I think we should be considerate of changing the perceptions of others as well. So, Read My Mind Radio, R-E-I-D, My Mind Radio. So it's Read My Mind.
So I just want to say one more thing on that same note. So that podcast that you heard earlier, Tommy created that all on his own. And like, I still don't know how he does all the many things that Tommy does. Seriously. Like, he does so many different things, but that podcast is really dope. And when you hear the rest of it, you'll really get a true appreciation for his editing skills. Yeah.
I have just one more question. Who's your target audience for Brown Boy Bad?
I don't really know if there is a target audience. I mean, right now, obviously I'm preaching to the choir. Right? All of you are familiar with what we're talking about within Brown Boy Bad. But I hope that, I mean, if Black in America can make it as a TV show, maybe Brown Boy Bad can. Maybe it can reach a wide audience and then help add that question mark to the end of that feeling, Brown Boy Bad. So, who knows?
All right, thank you folks for your attention. We are going to continue passing drinks and dancing maybe? No?
Give it up for Whitney Walker.